the road where the world looked away. Ethan Walker should not have been lying on the edge of that highway. At 34, recently released from active duty, he had imagined his battles ending quietly. Paperwork, silence, long nights without alarms. Instead, he was sprawled against cold asphalt on a forgotten stretch outside Denver, his body twisted at an angle that spoke of impact and rejection, as if the road itself had pushed him aside. Rain fell without mercy. It slicked the pavement until the surface reflected fractured headlights, streaks of white and red tearing past him like careless comets. Cars rushed by, engines hissing through the storm, their drivers sealed inside warm metal shells, unaware or unwilling to see the man collapsing between lanes. No brak screamed. No doors opened. The world kept its pace. Ethan dragged himself a few inches closer to the shoulder, muscles trembling under a weight that felt wrong, unresponsive. Blood soaked into the front of his old military jacket, darkening the fabric until it clung heavy and cold against his chest. His right leg burned with a deep, spreading pain that told him something was broken beyond simple strain. It refused to obey him, a useless anchor pinning him in place. His vision blurred. Rain mixed with blood along his brow, sliding into his eyes. He blinked slowly, forcing focus, watching headlights smear into long, indifferent lines. For the first time in years, fear crept in. Not the sharp, useful fear of combat, but something quieter and more dangerous. This kind of fear had no enemy to track. Fragments returned without warning. Footsteps too close behind him. A sudden shove. The hard, unmistakable crack of bone striking metal. Then the roar of traffic as he rolled into the road, breath knocked from his lungs. Whoever had attacked him was already gone, leaving nothing behind. Not words, not purpose, not even the dignity of explanation. Ethan had learned long ago that danger rarely announced itself. It arrived silently, decisively, and disappeared before questions could form. He pressed his palm against the pavement, fingers scraping uselessly over wet grit. His strength drained faster than it should have. He had survived worse. Gunfire ripping the air apart, explosions that turned night into daylight, missions where sleep came in stolen minutes between threats. But this was different. This was quiet. No commands barked in his ear. No teammates covering his blind side. Only rain tapping steadily against his skull and the slow, horrifying realization that the world would continue just fine if he stopped breathing here. A memory surfaced, uninvited. Dust and smoke. A wounded teammate slipping in his grip. Ethan had dragged him anyway, muscles screaming, refusing to let go. Not today, he had whispered then, believing the words with everything he had. Now he tried to say them again. His lips barely moved. Darkness pressed closer, narrowing his field of vision. The cold crept deeper into his bones. Somewhere, far above, traffic lights changed colors for no one who noticed him. Ethan Walker, former Navy SEAL, lay broken on a roadside while the city breathed around him, indifferent and uninterrupted. As the rain continued to fall, he wondered, not for the first time, if this empty stretch of highway would be his final battlefield. Loyalty in the rain. At first, Ethan thought the warmth against his side was another trick of his fading mind. Hallucinations were not unfamiliar companions when pain and exhaustion worked together. He assumed his thoughts were reaching for comfort, inventing it where none remained. But then the warmth shifted. A solid weight pressed closer, steady and deliberate. Coarse fur brushed his wrist, soaked through and smelling of rain and earth. Ethan forced his eyes open. A large German shepherd stood over him, body angled between Ethan and the oncoming traffic. Rain streamed from the dog's dark muzzle, dripping from thick black and tan fur dulled by grime and weather. He was powerfully built, athletic, not wild, his stance balanced and intentional. This was not a stray shaped by chance, but a working animal shaped by discipline. One ear carried a small, crooked notch, the kind left by an old injury that had healed imperfectly. His ribs showed faintly beneath the wet coat, suggesting hard weeks without proper care. But his eyes, amber, sharp, and impossibly focused, held no confusion. They were fixed entirely on Ethan, as if nothing else existed. The dog lowered his head, sniffed Ethan's face, then stepped closer and pressed his body along Ethan's side, offering what little warmth he could against the cold pavement. There was no panic in him, no frantic energy, only purpose. Ethan's chest tightened, not from pain this time, but from recognition. "Hey, buddy," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the rain. The dog's tail moved once, slow and cautious, relief flowing through his posture. He eased himself down beside Ethan, then shifted again, placing his broad back toward the road. When headlights grew too close, the dog rose instantly, barking sharp and commanding. A deep sound that cut through rain and engine noise alike. Cars swerved, tires hissed. Some drivers slowed, startled by the sudden challenge in the dark. Ethan watched through heavy eyelids, disbelief mingling with awe. He had no idea where the dog had come from or why he had chosen him. He only knew that for the first time that night, he was no longer alone. As the edges of his vision dimmed, Ethan reached out, fingers curling weakly into the thick fur at the dog's neck. The animal did not flinch or move away. He stayed perfectly still, as if bound by an oath older than words. "Good boy," Ethan murmured. The rain softened then, thinning into a cold mist, as though the sky itself had paused. Traffic slowed further. Headlights stretched longer across the wet road. Somewhere in that quiet shift, help finally noticed what loyalty had already claimed. When a sedan failed to slow, the dog stepped forward without hesitation, barking again, louder, firmer. The car swerved hard and came to a stop several yards ahead. A woman emerged, hesitant at first, until she saw the blood pooling beneath Ethan's leg. Her name was Sarah Miller. At 42, she carried herself with the instinctive alertness of someone shaped by emergencies. Years in trauma rooms and ambulances had trained her body to assess before fear could settle in. Rain had loosened strands of blonde hair from her usual tight bun, plastering them against her pale, freckled face. Her eyes, calm, practiced blue, took in the scene in seconds. She approached slowly, careful not to startle the dog. "It's okay," she said softly, hands visible, respectful of both man and animal. The German shepherd watched her closely, muscles taut, eyes never leaving her face. But he did not growl. He sensed what Ethan no longer could, that this woman brought order, not threat. Sarah knelt beside Ethan, movements precise and efficient. She checked his pulse, pressed gauze from her bag against the wound on his leg, noted the shallow rise and fall of his chest. "Stay with me," she murmured, though she wasn't sure he could hear her. Ethan stirred faintly. His fingers tightened once in the dog's fur, then fell slack. Sarah reached for her phone and called emergency services. Her voice clipped and exact as she relayed the location and injuries. While waiting, she elevated Ethan's leg, stabilized his neck, and spoke quietly, anchoring him with sound and presence. The dog remained pressed against Ethan's side, occasionally licking rain from his face, grounding him in warmth and scent. When the ambulance arrived in a flood of red and white light, even the paramedics paused at the sight of the animal guarding the injured man like a sentry. Only when Sarah placed a gentle hand on the dog's head did he allow them to lift Ethan onto the stretcher, whining low in protest as wet paws slid across the pavement. He followed until the doors closed. For the first time since he had found Ethan, the dog was left behind, sitting in the rain, ears drooping, watching the red lights disappear into the night. Inside the ambulance, drifting between pain and darkness, Ethan carried one clear thought with him. Someone had stayed. What remains after survival? Ethan surfaced slowly, as if waking from deep water. The steady rhythm of a heart monitor reached him first, a mechanical reassurance cutting through the fog in his mind. The smell of antiseptic filled his lungs, sharp and clean, replacing rain and exhaust. Light pressed against his closed eyes, bright, clinical, unforgiving. He was alive. The realization brought no rush of triumph. Instead, it settled heavily in his chest, unfamiliar and unfinished. His right leg was immobilized, wrapped in thick layers of white that felt heavier than any gear he had ever worn. Pain radiated outward in dull waves, manageable but constant. Instinct took over before thought. He scanned the room, counted exits, measured distance. Years of training did not disappear just because the battlefield had changed. Then memory returned. Wet pavement, passing headlights, the weight of a body beside his own. The dog. Ethan exhaled slowly, jaw tightening. Being alive felt less like victory and more like a responsibility he hadn't prepared for. The door opened with a quiet click. Sarah Miller stepped inside, clipboard tucked beneath her arm. She had changed into navy blue scrubs, her blonde hair pulled back into a practical ponytail. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, but her movements were steady, purposeful. "You're awake," she said, offering a small, genuine smile. "That's a good sign." Ethan nodded once. His voice was rough. "The dog." "He's still here," Sarah answered immediately. Security wanted animal control to take him, but he refused to leave. Honestly, none of us pushed very hard. Relief crossed Ethan's face, subtle but unmistakable. Sarah noticed. She had seen that expression before, the quiet gratitude of someone who no longer expected kindness. Later, a tall man with salt and pepper hair and rectangular glasses introduced himself as Dr. Michael Harris. He spoke clearly without dramatics. A compound fracture, internal bleeding. Surgery had gone well, but recovery would be long. Ethan listened without interruption, absorbing each detail like a mission brief. Pain was familiar, uncertainty was not. As visiting hours approached, a soft disturbance drifted down the hallway, the muted shuffle of paws, low voices. Sarah returned, this time without the clipboard. "I cleared it with administration," she said. "Just for a minute." The German shepherd entered hesitantly, nails clicking against the tile. He had been cleaned, though traces of the night remained. The scarred ear, the caution in his movements. The moment he saw Ethan, restraint vanished. His tail moved once, controlled but full of meaning, and he crossed the room with quiet urgency. Ethan's chest tightened as the dog pressed his head against the bed, warm and solid and real. Ethan reached out, fingers sinking into thick fur. The dog released a low sound, not joy exactly, but relief. For a long moment, neither moved. A volunteer veterinarian later confirmed what Ethan already suspected. No microchip, old training scars, muscle memory shaped by discipline. "He belonged to someone," she said gently. "Someone serious." Ethan looked down at the dog. "He belongs somewhere now," he replied, surprising himself with how certain the words felt. Rehabilitation began slowly, demanding a kind of patience Ethan had never mastered in combat. Days blurred into a careful rhythm of therapy, pain management, and long hours of thought he could no longer outrun. Jacob Monroe, his physical therapist, spoke plainly and without sympathy. "You don't fight recovery," Jacob told him. "You work with it." Max, because that was his name, attended every session aloud, lying against the wall with disciplined stillness. When Ethan faltered, Max rose and nudged his knee gently, not demanding, only reminding. Sarah visited often, sometimes in scrubs, sometimes in jeans and a sweater. Over quiet coffee breaks, pieces of her life surfaced. Loss, endurance, the decision to keep moving even when grief lingered. Ethan listened. Listening had once kept him alive. Now it taught him connection. The past found them one afternoon when an older man appeared at the doorway, hesitant and heavy with regret. Robert Hale had once been Max's handler, forced into retirement by failing health. Paperwork failed. Calls went unanswered. The system moved on. Max had not. "I'm not here to take him," Robert said quietly. "I just needed to know he survived." Max stepped forward and pressed his head briefly against the man's knee. Acknowledgement, not return. The choice was clear. Ethan signed the adoption papers the next morning. Ownership felt wrong. Partnership felt right. Spring arrived without announcement. Ethan walked slower now, a faint hitch in his stride, but each step was his. The small house he rented near the foothills wasn't much, but it faced the mountains. Max claimed it instantly. Ethan volunteered at a veteran center, understanding silence better than advice. Max lay at his feet, steady and watchful. Sarah came on weekends. Later, her niece Lily joined them, kneeling in front of Max with solemn respect. "He looks like a hero," she said. Max placed one large paw on her shoe. Agreement. One evening, sitting on the porch as the sun slipped behind the mountains, Ethan realized he was planning ahead. Not exits, not contingencies, just life. He rested his forehead briefly against Max's. "We're home," he said. Max's tail thumped once, solid, certain. Sometimes the miracle does not arrive with thunder or light from the sky. Sometimes it comes quietly, on four tired paws, at the exact moment a soul can no longer save itself. The road remains, but no one walks it alone.